Today we will be looking at how to resolve two of the most common types of corruption that occur in 3D games or applications: spiking or geometry corruption and texture corruption. Firstly, let's understand what makes up a 3D application or game. 3D images are composed of 3D geometry. On screen is a wireframe that demonstrates this. The image is completed when a bitmap texture is wrapped around the geometry and lighting, cameras and physics are applied. If one or more of the nodes of the geometry gets stuck, then the image will appear to be spiking. Here we can see that the buildings have some of their vertices or nodes misplaced or stuck, causing the objects to spike. This is caused by one of two things. Firstly, the memory that the nodes or vertices are held in has gone bad and is causing the geometry to spike. Secondly, there is a software issue with either the graphics driver or the specific applications being run. We will look at how to resolve these later in the video. Now let's understand what texture corruption during 3D games play is, with a few examples. Textures are bitmaps that wrap around the 3D geometry. Here we can see a very simple example of a soccer ball. The bitmap texture wraps around the geometry to create the 3D object. If the bitmap becomes corrupted, then we can see the resulting texture corruption on the 3D soccer ball. Of course, the bitmap could become corrupted in many different ways, so the example shown is specific to the particular bitmap's corruption patterns. The causes for both geometry and texture corruption are the same, so we will use the same debug and diagnosis steps for both cases. The first place to investigate is the software. Please make sure that the motherboard BIOS and chipset drivers are up to date. The BIOS and chipset drivers can be found in the motherboard manufacturer's website. Please look for instructions on how to check for your motherboard version and tools that will be needed to safely update the BIOS and chipset drivers. Please make sure that the graphics drivers are up to date. They can be found at www.amd.com/drivers. That the system meets the minimum specifications of the application and that any application patches are installed. Finally, please check that the correct versions of DirectX or OpenGL are installed. These requirements will be documented directly on the box that the application came in or on the application publisher's website. The second step is to investigate the hardware. This type of corruption is usually caused by one or more of the following: overclocking, overheating, defective or mismatched memory, an incorrectly configured BIOS, an underpowered power supply, and finally a non-functioning graphics card. So let's look at each one of them one by one. Overclocking can stress the system and can eventually cause the memory to become faulty. Set any overclock components back to their default values, either in the motherboard BIOS or through any overclocking software that may be in use. Overclocking can also lead to overheating. If the corruption occurs randomly or a certain period of time after the computer has been in operation, then this points to the corruption being caused by overheating. Ensure that all the components in the computer have good air circulation and the internals of the computer are running at room temperature. Open up the case and point a fan at the components to see if the problem goes away. Ensure that the graphics card and processor's fans are spinning correctly. Try using an air blower to remove any dust that may have accumulated on the heatsink fan or inside the heatsink unit. Check the heatsinks to make sure that they are snug and do not wobble around. Overheating can also cause the components to slow down, which can also be the cause of many other computer malfunctions. Ensure that there is proper ventilation of air inside the chassis. Verify no component or cables are obstructing the free airflow. 3D corruption can also occur if the main system memory is defective or mismatched. Try replacing the system memory module with another known good memory module of the same specification to see if the problem rectifies itself. If the BIOS is not configured correctly, then 3D corruption can also result. Please watch the AMD's BIOS video for more information. This will help in understanding how to rectify any BIOS-related corruption symptoms. The link is on the screen now. If the graphics card does not receive sufficient power, then it will certainly operate incorrectly, and one potential symptom could be 3D corruption during games play. Please watch AMD's power supply video for more details on how an underpowered power supply can cause system issues. The link is on the screen now. Finally, if all the steps outlined in this video have been performed and 3D games corruption is still occurring, then the graphics card is most likely the cause. Firstly, ensure the graphics card is seated properly inside the motherboard slot and all auxiliary power connectors are securely connected before switching on the system. Try to test the graphics card in another PC. If the same problem moves with the graphics card, then the card is probably defective and needs to be replaced. Please watch the video how to replace your graphics card. The link is on the screen now. This will explain all of the steps to correctly replace and install a new graphics card. So in conclusion, 3D corruption in games play is usually caused by incorrect software versions or system or graphics memory corruption. Firstly, ensure that all the software versions are up to date and compatible, and that all of the hardware debug and troubleshooting steps outlined in this video have been performed. Please check for overclocking, overheating, defective or mismatched memory, an incorrectly configured BIOS, an underpowered power supply, and finally a non-functioning graphics card. Following the steps outlined in this video should resolve the majority of 3D corruption symptoms in games play.